Welcome back to the captain's quarters. We left off our story in October of 1915, almost a year to the day after Shackleton and his crew left for his journey to be the first person to cross the Antarctic continent. But fate had other plans. Their ship was trapped by ice for 9 months and eventually was crushed under it, and they were forced to abandon ship. So there they are now on the ice, living there in tents and snow igloos, living off of little provisions that they were able to grab off of the ship and whatever game they were able to hunt, whether it be penguins or seals. While it was a rougher life than the boat, it was still a manageable one. While they weren't going anywhere, they were actually moving quite a bit. The ice pack was a big circular plate that was spinning clockwise, and it was taking them northwest. And as rations began to get smaller and smaller, and the penguins and the seals were no longer in the area, they were beginning to be forced to ration what little food they have left. They were being fed a biscuit a day for breakfast and 3 lumps of sugar. I mean, it was slim pickings. So these guys were emaciated, hungry, weak, and still being forced to push forward and try to get over this horrific scene. And after 5 long, miserable months of living on the ice, dealing with the conditions of the wind and the snow and the blizzards, living off of barely any provisions, Shackleton decided that the ice was soft enough to be able to launch the boats to maybe find some land. And now their old miserable predicament were the good old days, as they were now in boats being splashed with freezing cold water, trying to find land in this Antarctic wasteland. They paddled all day. They would be frozen to their oars after the end of their shift. They would have to be ripped away from their oars and to be stretched out. At night, they would try and find an ice floe that was big enough to drag the boats on and just rest for a while. And there was one part of the story where somebody was sleeping in their tent, trying to rest after a long day of rowing, and the ice split underneath him and he fell into the damn frozen water. His buddies around him pulled him out and said, "Are you all right? Are you all right?" He's like, "I'm fine. The only thing I regret is I dropped my tobacco in the damn drink." But they got him out, dried him off, and they tried to rest the rest of the night before going out again. Eventually, the ice dissipated, and they were now in pretty well open water without anywhere to stop. So they had no choice but to keep paddling, keep going forward. And finally, after 7 long days rowing an unforgiving sea, being wet, frozen, damp, and just miserable, they finally land on Elephant Island. It was a year and 4 months since they had touched land. And as delirious as they were, as broken and as emaciated as they might have been, they survived. They made it back to land. And that must have been a great feeling to finally be somewhere else besides ice. So these guys were finally back on land. Well, there's a lot of good that did them. They still didn't have any way of getting in contact with anybody. Nobody knew they were out there. Shackleton said, "All right, well, there's no point of waiting around here for somebody to rescue us because we're so far out of trade routes and whaling routes. It's not going to happen. We're going to have to sail off and try and find a port to get some help out of here." And so he decided that their best shot was right where they started this whole journey, South Georgia Island, 800 miles away to the east. It was just a speck on the map. And these guys were going to have to take a lifeboat, throw it out into the ocean, out into some of the most dangerous waters in the whole world, Drake's Passage, and try and make landfall. It was an impossible feat. Could you do that, Johnny Depp, in your best days as a pirate in Pirates of the Caribbean? Oh, no, I think you're full of guff there, Johnny. Well, the one thing that they had on their side was Worsley, Captain Worsley. He was a master navigator, and if anybody could help him get through this, it was him. With his navigating and Shackleton's leadership, they had a shot at this. So of the 3 lifeboats, they chose the James Caird. They did everything they could to make this thing as seaworthy as possible. And on April 27th, 1916, Shackleton and 5 other men got onto the boat and launched into the abyss. The crew members they left behind gave them a nice send-off, very optimistic. They thought, this is our only shot. And they remained on the island to live in their underturned lifeboats that they converted into living quarters, warmed by makeshift stoves, burning seal blubber, living off of the seals and the penguins that they could find. Their survival story continued while these brave men went out into the ocean in a dinky little lifeboat in some of the most dangerous waters on Earth and the condition that they were in. It was an impossible task, but they have already overcome so many impossible odds before, so why stop now? The choppy waters and the freezing cold and the 50-foot high waves wasn't what made this journey so incredible. It was the navigating feat that it was. To find that speck of land on an 800-mile journey across the choppy ocean, and only one man maybe on Earth at the time could do it, Captain Worsley. Worsley used a device called a sextant, which you've seen before. You've seen them, Johnny. It's a device that sailors use to navigate the seas and to find out where they were on a map. So they would use the eyepiece, and there's a mirror here and some sunglasses here so you don't burn your eyes out. They would look through here and find the sun in the mirror, and they would bring the sun down until the half mirror here shoots out and you can see past it, and you line the sun up to the horizon. And from there, you look down here at, there's a series of 0 to 120 degrees. You use that, and then you use crazy math from a book that calculates the position of the sun in the sky on specific times of the year. And from multiple readings, like plotting a graph, they were able to see where they were headed. And let me tell you, I've been trying to figure this thing out for months. And that's me in the 21st century with the internet and all, time in the world right now this year. And I can't figure this out. And that, I'm not on a boat. I'm just standing here. Worsley was on a rocking boat dealing with waves crashing on him, trying to find the sun in the sky through clouds. From what I can find, he was able to take 4 readings, being braced by his, fellow crew people to keep him steady while the boat was rocking. He was able to take 4 readings, and other than that, he used dead reckoning, which is basically his gut, trying to find the speck on the map. And after 17 days rowing, soaked, frozen, they find it. They find South Georgia Island. It's a miracle. And it's another impossible feat. But they're not done yet. They're on the totally opposite side of the island from the Stromness whaling station. They cannot do another trek on the waters. The boat isn't in any condition for it. The men are not. So these guys had to go across this uncharted, unmapped, nobody has ever done it, South Georgia Island, and trying to find this whaling station once and for all so that they can get help and rescue everybody else. So Shackleton decides to take Worsley with him and Tom Crean with him, which, a fun fact, I was actually able to go see his home in Ireland in February this year, right before it shut down. I think we had 30,000 cases in China at that time. Well, yeah, things have changed a bit since then, huh? But anyway, they took nails off of the boat and fastened them to their shoes to make, like makeshift crampons so they can traverse the ice a little easier. They brought a rope with them, and they just set off into the unknown. They didn't know what to expect, but they knew what they were going for. They were going for Stromness whaling station. And there they go. And they marched on through the glaciers, and every step facing the danger of slipping into a crevasse and being lost forever. So they walked, in tandem with their rope, so if somebody did fall, maybe they could save them and pull them back up. Yeah, they kept on marching, weak, weary from the almost 2 years being trapped at sea and on the ice. And they marched up this mountainside, hoping to get onto the other side of it. Well, they reached the top of the ridge, and they found that it was too steep. It was just a sheer downward slope. And they knew that they couldn't go back. There was no going back. They had to keep pushing forward. So Shackleton decided that, what do we got to lose? They coiled up the rope that they had, and they made a little kind of a pad. And they each sat on the pad, kind of held on to each other, and shoved off. They leapt off into the abyss and slid down this mountain, and they survived it. They went down 1,000 feet, slowed down, and they made it to the bottom, a little shaken, but they survived it. I mean, I guess at this point they've survived so much impossible odds. Why wouldn't they? I mean, that's awesome, man. Well, now that they were on the other side of this mountain, they kept pushing forward and they began to see familiar land. It was the bay that the whaling station was in. And then not long after that, they heard the work whistle, 7 a.m. call for the station. That must have sounded like heaven. Imagine that, being lost and finally hearing just a semblance of civilization. And they marched into the station, made it to the captain's quarters there, opened the door, and he didn't recognize the people that were before him. Shackleton knew him for many years, but he didn't recognize him because of the shape he was in. And Shackleton told him who he was. I am Ernest Shackleton. And they say that the man wept. So they finally made it back. They've marched for 36 hours, I believe. Incredible. And 3 days later, they sent a rescue ship around for the 3 men on the other side of the island. And Shackleton went and tried to rescue his men on Elephant Island, but again, the ice stopped him. But finally, 3 months later, a ship reached Elephant Island. And the jubilance that the men experienced when they finally saw a boat, the first they didn't know what they were seeing. Was it a mirage? And they saw it, and they all leapt out of their lifeboat. And Shackleton on the ship's deck looked out in a periscope and was counting the men, and they were all there. None of the men had perished. They got the boat there, they rescued them, they got them on board, and they got them home. And they all lived happily ever after. Just don't ask about, World War I and the other ship that was on the other side of Antarctica and the dogs. But anyway, they survived. The 28 men that were on the Endurance survived, and that's the important thing. What did you think, Johnny Depp? Oh, you old dirty dog. So I hope you enjoyed that story. It's one of my favorites, and I hope maybe it gave you some strength and perseverance to help get through these next few months, because they will be tough and they will be dark. But it is inside each and every one of us to be able to overcome any odd. These guys showed us that. So remember that always. Now is not forever. And be strong, be safe, be smart. Delete Facebook. And let's look forward to the day we can all celebrate together that we defeated the virus and we can live a normal life. Here's to that. Cheers. Yeah, you gotta leave now. Yeah, I'm done. I gotta tear all this down. I gotta go back to work. Take care.